Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Letter from Marbury Hall. The morning was grey and damp in London, one of those listless days when the drizzle clings to the window panes and even the most enthusiastic pedestrian begins to question the value of fresh air. Hercule Poirot, however, was perfectly content. He sat before the fire in his comfortable armchair, the neatest man in London, sipping a cup of thick, rich chocolate and reading the Times with his usual precision. All was order until the doorbell rang. "Ah," murmured Poirot, glancing up. "At this hour, it is either the postman or a client." "Hastings, mon ami, you will observe, life provides its surprises when one least expects them." Captain Hastings, seated across from him with the morning's sporting news, smiled. "You thrive on surprises, Poirot. Though I must say, they have an uncanny way of finding you." Their landlady entered with a letter in hand. "Special delivery, Mr. Poirot." "Came by motor, it did." The driver said it was most urgent. Poirot took the envelope delicately. It was sealed with wax, a rarity in those modern times, and the handwriting trembled across the page as though written by an unsteady hand. The seal bore the impression of a stag's head beneath a crown. "From the country," murmured Poirot, studying it. "Observe, Hastings, expensive stationery, but the ink blot at the lower corner suggests haste. A lady's hand, yet one under great strain." He broke the seal with a paper knife and read aloud. "Monsieur Poirot, I beg of you to come at once. My life is in danger. There have been 3 incidents already, each dismissed as chance, yet I know they were not. I can no longer trust those around me. Please, do not delay. I fear the next attempt will not fail. Yours in dread, Eleanor Marbury. Marbury Hall, Gloucestershire." Poirot read it twice, then folded it slowly. His grey-green eyes, usually amused, now gleamed with the keen light of interest. 3 incidents, he said thoughtfully. And each were explained away as chance. That, Hastings, is the language of a mind uncertain whether to believe its own fears or to dismiss them. "You think she might be imagining it?" Hastings asked. Poirot shook his head. "Non, mon ami. A woman who trembles, she may exaggerate, but one who writes thus, she fears reality. There is danger, and more than that, there is psychology. The phrase, 'I can no longer trust those around me,' it tells me the house is not a home, but a battlefield." Hastings straightened eagerly. "You mean to go?" "Mais oui. The little grey cells demand exercise. We will take the first train to Gloucestershire. Pack lightly, mon ami, we go to Marbury Hall." By late afternoon, their train was winding through the misty countryside. The fields lay desolate beneath the November sky, and as the locomotive whistled mournfully through the valley, Hastings remarked that the scene might well suit a ghost story. Poirot smiled faintly. "Perhaps, Hastings. But I prefer my ghosts to be made of flesh and blood. They are easier to question." At the small station of Marbury Holt, a dark motorcar awaited them. The driver, a taciturn man in livery, nodded stiffly and opened the door without a word. The road climbed steadily through woods that thickened into shadow, until at last the trees parted to reveal a great house of grey stone, its gables and turrets outlined against the fading sky. Marbury Hall stood solemn and ancient, with ivy clinging to its walls and the faint gleam of lamps in the windows. Eleanor Marbury received them in the drawing-room, a tall, graceful woman in her early 30s, dressed in mourning black though no recent death was apparent. Her complexion was pale, her dark eyes anxious. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, clasping his hand with visible relief. You cannot imagine what comfort it gives me to see you here. I have been so afraid, every day I expect another accident." Poirot bowed courteously. "Then we shall see, mademoiselle, whether these accidents are the work of chance or of design. But first, tell me everything." She led them to the fire, where she began her account. The first incident had occurred 3 weeks earlier, a loose stair rod on the main staircase, which had sent her tumbling. Fortunately, she had caught the banister in time. The second, the heavy picture that fell from the wall, narrowly missing her. The third, her riding saddle, tampered with so that the girth strap snapped mid-ride. Each time, she said, they said it was coincidence. Old houses, worn fittings, unlucky chance. But I know, Monsieur Poirot, someone wants me dead. Poirot listened attentively, his fingertips pressed together, eyes half closed. You live here with family, yes? Yes. My cousin, Arthur Marbury, he inherited half the estate after my father's death last year. My companion, Miss Fielding. The housekeeper, Mrs. Greaves. And several servants. We are not many, yet. I feel surrounded. Poirot's eyes opened sharply. Half the estate, you said? And the other half, yours? She nodded. Yes. But only while I remain unmarried. Should I die, or wed without the family's consent, everything passes to Arthur. Tiens. That is interesting, Poirot murmured. An incentive both for haste and for patience. At that moment, the door opened. A tall man entered, dark-haired, handsome, with a charming ease that did not quite reach his eyes. Ah, I see our famous detective has arrived, he said lightly. Arthur Marbury. My cousin has been quite beside herself with worry, I'm afraid. You'll find no villains here, Poirot, only draughty windows and clumsy servants. Poirot inclined his head. I hope you are correct, monsieur. But you will forgive me if I make sure with my own little methods. Arthur smiled, but the expression flickered. Poirot saw the faint tightening around his jaw, the smallest of betrayals. When he and Hastings were later shown to their rooms, Hastings remarked, You don't trust him, Poirot. Poirot adjusted his tie before the mirror. Mon ami, I trust no one until I must. Observe, he laughs at danger, but too loudly. He reassures his cousin, but with impatience. A man who wishes to conceal fear, or guilt, often smiles the most. He turned, his reflection gleaming back with sharp intelligence. This house, he said softly, is full of secrets. And one of them, Hastings, is deadly. Outside, the wind moaned through the trees, rattling the window pines. Somewhere in the hall below, a door creaked slowly shut. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Listen, Hastings. Already the house whispers. Chapter 2, Shadows of the Estate. The next morning broke clear but cold, with pale sunlight glimmering faintly across the frost-tipped lawns of Marbury Hall. A low mist clung to the woods, and the air was heavy with that curious stillness which so often precedes revelation. Poirot, who disliked English country air almost as much as he disliked disorder, stood by the window of his guest room, immaculately dressed as ever, observing the expanse below. Hastings joined him, buttoning his jacket with a brisk soldierly air. Well, Poirot, he said, you must admit it's a fine estate. Hard to imagine anything sinister happening here. Poirot's lips curved slightly. Ah, my dear Hastings, you English, always you are deceived by appearances. The great house, the fine manners, the silver teapot, yet beneath, the passions, the envy, the greed, they boil, as the chocolate in my saucepan. He glanced at the floor. And see, already, a clue. Hastings followed his gaze. A faint trail of muddy footprints crossed the carpet, light and narrow, leading from the corridor to the dressing table. Poirot crouched, inspecting them delicately with a magnifying glass he had produced as though by magic. "Not a servant," he murmured. "The shoes are small, or a woman's. But why come here, to my room, when I arrived only last night?" "Perhaps by mistake," Hastings suggested. Poirot wagged a finger. "There are no mistakes, mon ami, only motives concealed." He straightened. "Come, let us breakfast. I am eager to see the inhabitants of this hall in the light of day. The morning, it reveals character, as surely as the sunrise reveals dust." The dining room at Marbury Hall was a large, panelled chamber hung with sombre portraits. A fire crackled in the hearth, throwing warmth over the long table. Miss Eleanor Marbury sat at the head, pale but gracious, attempting conversation that did little to hide her anxiety. Opposite her sat Arthur Marbury, his easy charm once again on display, though his eyes were watchful. At his side was a young woman with an air of quiet restraint, Miss Alice Fielding, Eleanor's companion, whose downcast eyes and modest manner lent her the appearance of one accustomed to the background. Mrs. Greaves, the housekeeper, entered to pour coffee, a tall, severe woman whose movements were precise, almost military. The maid, a nervous girl named Lily, followed silently with toast and preserves. Poirot greeted them all with old-world courtesy and took his seat. Arthur smiled. "So, Monsieur Poirot, how does one begin an investigation of this sort? Shall we all line up for questioning?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "That would make it too easy, monsieur." "No, I prefer to observe, to listen. Words, they lie, but expressions, gestures, ou jamais. They betray the soul." Arthur laughed lightly. "Then I'd best keep my face very still." Eleanor frowned. "Arthur, please. This is no time for jokes. Forgive me, dear cousin. I only mean to lighten the mood. After all, there's been no real harm done, yet." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "You say yet. Curious, is it not, that the mind always anticipates the completion of an unfinished act?" Arthur looked momentarily startled, then turned away, stirring his tea. After breakfast, Eleanor led Poirot and Hastings on a tour of the house. It was a place of grandeur, yet also of melancholy. The corridors were long and echoing, portraits of stern ancestors gazed down with disapproval. Poirot paused often, his gaze moving over small details, a vase slightly turned, a rug corner disturbed, a lock scratched by a clumsy hand. "Your father, mademoiselle?" he asked quietly. "He was a man of wealth." "Yes," she said. "Though the estate is not as it was. My father left no direct heir but me, and Arthur. They said he intended a new will, but none was found after his death." "Ah," said Poirot softly. "And you think, perhaps, that will was inconvenient to someone?" Her lips tightened. "I don't know what to think. Only that ever since I inherited, nothing has been right in this house." They stopped before a heavy oak door. "This was my father's study," she said. "It's been kept locked since his death. Only Mrs. Greaves and I have keys." Poirot bent to examine the keyhole. "Yet see, Hastings, the scratches here. Someone has attempted entry." Eleanor paled. "But that's impossible." Poirot smiled faintly. "Impossible, mademoiselle, is a word that exists only in the dictionary of fools. Later, we will examine this room in detail." In the afternoon, they met again in the drawing-room. Poirot spent the hours speaking quietly with the servants, walking through the gardens, and, most of all, observing. Hastings grew restless. "Well, Poirot," he said at last, "have you discovered anything?" Poirot tapped his finger against his temple. "I have seen much, and understood a little. Consider, Hastings, a frightened woman who says she is attacked, but her cousin treats it lightly, a companion who watches but never speaks, a housekeeper who listens too closely, a maid whose hands tremble when she pours the tea. You suspect them all. I observe them all. To suspect too soon is the error of the amateur. Just then, Miss Fielding entered quietly with a letter in hand. For you, Monsieur Poirot. It arrived by messenger from London. He took it, glanced at the handwriting, and smiled. Ah! A small matter of the railway timetable, it may prove useful. As she turned to leave, Poirot said gently, Mademoiselle, forgive me, you are devoted to Miss Marbury, yes. She hesitated. Of course. And yet, there is something in your eyes, a fear, perhaps not for her, but of her. Miss Fielding coloured faintly. You are mistaken, sir. Miss Marbury has been nothing but kind to me. Poirot bowed. Sometimes kindness conceals as much as cruelty. Merci. She left swiftly, and Hastings frowned. Poirot, what on earth did you mean by that? Poirot shrugged delicately. Merely that fear takes many forms. Some fear for their lives, others for their secrets. That evening, the household gathered in the drawing-room for tea. Poirot, insisting on his usual chocolate, declined the pot offered to him and observed as Mrs. Greaves poured. Hastings noticed how Poirot's sharp eyes followed every movement, the handling of the cups, the sugar spoon, the teapot lid. Eleanor lifted her cup, smiled faintly, and began to raise it to her lips, when Poirot's hand shot out. Stop, he cried. The room froze. Poirot leaned forward, sniffed delicately at her cup, and frowned. You will forgive me, mademoiselle, but this tea, it carries an odour most faint yet unmistakable. Arthur rose, irritated. What nonsense. Monsieur. Not nonsense. The faint scent of bitter almonds, a friend most unwelcome, cyanide. There was a collective gasp. The cup fell from Eleanor's hand, shattering on the carpet. Poirot turned to Mrs. Greaves. You poured this tea yourself, madam? Her face had gone white. I did, sir. But I swear I know nothing of it. The pot was filled in the kitchen, as always. Poirot raised a finger. Calm yourself. We shall test the pot, and the leaves within. But one thing is certain, the attempt has been made, and failed. The would-be murderer grows bolder. Eleanor shuddered. You've saved my life, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot inclined his head modestly. Perhaps. But do not thank me yet, mademoiselle. The killer, he does not give up so easily. He will try again. He turned to the assembled faces, each pale, each fearful. Until then, said Poirot softly, no one leaves this house. Chapter 3, The Poisoned Cup. For the remainder of that evening, the air in Marbury Hall hung heavy with fear. The shattered china had been cleared away, yet the scent of almonds, faint but haunting, still lingered, as though death itself had brushed through the room and taken note of its quarry. Eleanor Marbury sat trembling near the fire, a shawl drawn tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes darted toward every sound, the rustle of a curtain, the creak of the floorboards. Poirot, meanwhile, stood near the table, calm and precise, examining the teapot and its contents with that deliberate care which had made his reputation. Arthur Marbury paced in agitation. This is outrageous, Poirot. To suggest that someone in this house, in my house, has attempted murder. It's absurd. Poirot did not look up. Absurd? Perhaps. Yet your cousin's death would have benefited someone, would it not? A tragic accident over tea, who would question it? Arthur's face darkened. You imply. I imply nothing, said Poirot smoothly. I deduce. There is a difference. Hastings interjected, Poirot, Are you certain about the poison? Perfectly. The odor of bitter almonds cannot be mistaken. Though the quantity was small, perhaps only enough to cause dizziness had Mademoiselle taken a sip. He paused, holding up a small silver spoon. Observe, the residue clings to the edge. Someone added the poison at the last moment. Mrs. Greaves, the housekeeper, wrung her hands. It weren't me, sir. I filled the pot myself, same as always. Lily brought it from the pantry. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah. Then we must speak with Lily. The maid entered moments later, pale and frightened. Her apron trembled in her hands. I swear, sir, I didn't touch nothing. I just brought the tray as Mrs. Greaves told me. I never? Poirot raised a hand gently. Calm yourself, child. Panic clouds the memory. Tell me, who was in the kitchen when you fetched the tea? Just me and cook, sir. But Mr. Arthur came through, said he was after a glass of water. Arthur's head snapped up. Nonsense. I was nowhere near the pantry. Poirot's moustache quivered. Yet the maid insists. It's a lie. Arthur cried hotly. You're turning my own servants against me. Perhaps, said Poirot softly, truth turns them, not I. The remainder of the household dispersed uneasily, leaving Poirot, Hastings, and Eleanor alone by the dying fire. Tell me, mademoiselle, Poirot said, had you any quarrel today with anyone in this house? Quarrel? No, though Arthur seemed displeased when I refused to sign a few documents he brought. He said they concerned the sale of some land, but I would not sign until I had examined them. He laughed and called me suspicious. Poirot nodded slowly. Wise, mademoiselle. A signature is sometimes the most dangerous weapon in a murderer's arsenal. You would be surprised how often ink replaces the dagger. Hastings frowned. But surely Arthur wouldn't be foolish enough to attempt poison in front of us all. Poirot looked at him keenly. Precisely, Hastings. Therefore, perhaps it was not Arthur. But then, who? Let us consider. Mrs. Greaves poured the tea, Lily brought it, but neither touched the cup after it was set. Miss Fielding was near Eleanor, yes? Yes, Eleanor said quietly. She was beside me, knitting. When the tray arrived, she passed me the cup. Tiens. Then the opportunity was hers, but what of the motive? Does she gain by your death? Eleanor hesitated. I cannot say. Alice has been loyal to me for years. Poirot studied her face with that unreadable calm. Loyalty is a fragile flower, mademoiselle. It withers when love, jealousy, or desperation breathe upon it. Later that night, Hastings found Poirot in his room, sitting beside a small table on which the tea set had been placed for examination. Each cup and saucer lay in neat formation, labelled and numbered. You're working late, Hastings remarked. Mais oui, mon ami. The mind, it must be orderly, even when surrounded by chaos. He pointed at the cups. See here, one of them has a faint crack near the rim. It belongs to Miss Fielding. Another has a fingerprint on the inside of the cup, not hers, not the housekeeper's. The third, Mademoiselle Eleanor's, has a drop of residue. A chain of logic, as clear as the tracks of a fox in snow. Hastings bent closer. And whose fingerprint is it? Poirot smiled mysteriously. Ah, that I do not yet know. But I have taken an impression. Tomorrow, I will compare it to those of the household. It will tell us much. He stood, smoothing his tie. Yet, Hastings, there is something deeper. This affair, it is not only about money. There is emotion here, a strong, repressed emotion. I smell jealousy, resentment, perhaps even guilt. Hastings stared. Guilt? You mean Miss Marbury herself? Poirot's eyes twinkled. I mean, my friend, that in every drama of attempted murder, the intended victim plays a role, whether she knows it or not. The next morning dawned with a brittle brightness. A pale sun gleamed over the lawns, turning the frost to silver. Poirot and Hastings joined the others at breakfast, a strained meal, filled with uneasy silences and the clatter of cutlery. Poirot observed quietly, his gaze flicking from face to face. Arthur avoided Eleanor's eyes, pretending interest in the newspaper. Miss Fielding, pale as the tablecloth, nibbled at her toast. Mrs. Greaves watched everyone with a kind of fearful curiosity. When the meal ended, Poirot rose. Mademoiselle Eleanor, you will permit me to make a small investigation in the study of your late father. Of course, she said. I told you it remains locked, but here is the key. He accepted it with a bow and led Hastings down the corridor. The room was dim and stale with disuse, the curtains drawn and a faint smell of dust in the air. Papers still covered the desk as if waiting for a hand that would never return. Poirot examined the drawers, noting the faint scratches around one lock. Someone has searched here recently, he murmured. They found little at first, a few letters, old receipts, a photograph of a young Eleanor with her father. But then Poirot's eye fell on a writing blotter. He opened it and studied the faint impressions on the top sheet. Producing a soft pencil, he rubbed lightly until words emerged in ghostly relief. Will to be revised, half to Eleanor, half in trust, Arthur not to know, until. Poirot stopped reading, his expression sharpening. Mon Dieu, Hastings, the missing will. Or at least, a note of its creation. Then perhaps Eleanor was meant to inherit everything. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone feared she would discover this and act. Money, Hastings, it breeds strange loyalties and stranger crimes. As they returned to the hall, a sudden sound echoed from above, a crash, followed by a shriek. Poirot raced up the stairs, Hastings close behind. They burst into Eleanor's room to find her standing rigid, staring at the floor. At her feet lay a shattered vase, and above, the heavy chandelier swayed ominously, a broken cord dangling from the ceiling. It fell, she whispered. Just missed me. Oh, God, it's happening again. Poirot examined the cord. Cut, he said grimly. Deliberately. ABN, Hastings, our would-be murderer is not content with poison. Now he turns to the methods of blunt force. Eleanor's hands clutched the bedpost, trembling. You must find him, Monsieur Poirot, before he succeeds. Poirot's gaze moved slowly across the room, to the door left ajar, the faint scent of perfume lingering in the air, and a small, glinting object on the carpet. He bent to pick it up, a single pearl button, freshly torn from its fastening. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Ah, he murmured softly. The plot thickens, and the shadows grow longer. Chapter 4, Secrets in the Study. The morning after the chandelier incident dawned cold and sullen, with clouds hanging low over the chimneys of Marbury Hall. The house seemed uneasy, its silence broken only by the occasional creak of an old floorboard or the wind sighing in the corridor. Fear had settled over its inhabitants like an invisible frost. Poirot, however, appeared untroubled. He entered the breakfast room immaculate as ever, moustaches sharply pointed, boots polished to perfection. He greeted everyone with cheerful formality, as though attempted murder were but an unfortunate inconvenience. Good morning, mademoiselle, he said brightly to Eleanor Marbury. I trust you have slept well. She gave a short laugh. I hardly slept at all, Monsieur Poirot. Every shadow seemed alive. Indeed? That is excellent, he said calmly. Fear, it sharpens the senses. And I require those senses now, if you please, for this morning we will enter your late father's study once more. Arthur Marbury looked up from his newspaper. Still at that business, Poirot? I thought you'd exhausted the room yesterday. Poirot smiled. A great detective, monsieur, never exhausts, he observes, rests, and observes again. The truth is shy, like a cat, one must wait quietly for it to show itself. Arthur's mouth tightened. You're wasting your time. Poirot inclined his head. If so, I shall waste it most happily. The study, when they entered it again, felt heavier than before. Dust motes floated in the slanted light, and the air held that peculiar scent of faded ink and secrets long buried. Hastings followed Poirot in, while Eleanor remained near the door, hesitant. Poirot surveyed the room with his sharp eyes. Everything here, he said softly, speaks of a mind that loved precision. Observe the books, arranged by author, by size. The letters, bundled neatly. A man of order, yes. Yes, Eleanor said quietly. My father hated disorder, in his papers, in his household, even in his family. Ah, but disorder has entered since his death, murmured Poirot. Now let us find where it hides. He moved to the desk, examining the drawers one by one. From the bottom drawer he withdrew a small stack of envelopes bound by string. Hastings, note this. All correspondence from a firm of solicitors, Pennington and Vale. He untied the string and examined the top letter. Tiens. Dated 2 weeks before the father's death. It mentions a draft will, to be witnessed but not yet signed. And this, a note of concern regarding the financial difficulties of Mr. Arthur Marbury. Eleanor's breath caught. Then it's true. Father meant to alter the inheritance. Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps he wished only to delay Arthur's portion. The distinction, mademoiselle, may be small but fatal. As he replaced the letters, Hastings's attention fell on a portrait above the fireplace, a painting of the late Mr. Marbury, stern-faced and commanding. Beneath it stood a cabinet of dark mahogany. Hello, Poirot, Hastings said. This looks newer than the rest of the furniture. Poirot turned. Indeed, Hastings. And notice, a thin line of dust round the base, but none beneath the handles. It has been opened recently. He tried the door, locked. Poirot removed a delicate little tool from his pocket. Within moments there was a faint click, and the cabinet swung open. Inside lay several ledgers, a stack of letters tied with blue ribbon, and a small wooden box. Poirot lifted the box and examined it with fascination. It was carved with initials, E.M. Eleanor Marbury, he said softly. Yet locked. You have never seen this, mademoiselle. She shook her head. Never. My father must have placed it there before he died. Poirot turned the box in his hands. The lock was small, the type that could be opened with a hairpin or by a determined thief. With a swift motion, he prized it open. Inside was a collection of old letters and one photograph. Eleanor gasped. That's my mother. But she died when I was very young. Poirot examined the letters. The handwriting differed from that of Mr. Marbury. Love letters, he murmured, but not from her husband. Mon Dieu, this is delicate. Eleanor blushed deeply. I had no idea. Poirot interrupted gently. You could not. But someone else, perhaps, did. Scandal, my dear mademoiselle, it is a weapon sharper than any knife. He glanced again at the photograph, a woman of striking beauty, inscribed at the back with the words, To my beloved, from A.F. Poirot's brows lifted slightly. A.F., he murmured. Those initials, curious. We must ask ourselves, who in this household shares them? Eleanor's eyes widened. Arthur Francis Marbury. Poirot said nothing for a moment. Then, with quiet gravity, you see, Hastings, the circle begins to close. By midday, Poirot had ordered the entire household assembled in the drawing room. Arthur came reluctantly, his expression defiant. Miss Fielding appeared pale, her hands clasped nervously. Mrs. Greaves stood rigid near the door, and the maid hovered uncertainly behind her. Poirot addressed them all with calm authority. Miss Amiss, a crime has been attempted in this house, not once, but several times. Poison, falling objects, the cut cord. The killer, or should I say, the would-be killer, hides among you. But he forgets one thing Hercule Poirot does not guess. He knows. Arthur gave a short laugh. And do you know now, Poirot? Or are you still playing with your teapots and fingerprints? Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, monsieur, always you are impatient. Patience, it is the companion of truth. He turned to Eleanor. You have the letters, mademoiselle. She handed them to him, trembling slightly. Poirot opened one and read aloud a fragment, a tender line, unmistakably written by a man in love. Arthur's face went white. Where did you get those? In your uncle's study, said Poirot calmly. Locked away, hidden with care. They prove not merely indiscretion, they suggest betrayal. A scandal that, if revealed, would destroy the honor of the Marbury name. Arthur's composure broke. I never meant to hurt anyone. I was young, she was lonely, it was years ago. Parfaitement, said Poirot. But your uncle discovered it, did he not? Hence the change in the will, the plan to cut you off entirely. You needed the money, badly. And when he died, you thought the secret safe. Arthur's jaw tightened. You can't prove any of this. Perhaps not in court, Poirot said softly. But you and I, we understand each other. Yet you are not my murderer, monsieur. You are too reckless, too impulsive. The attempts here, they are clever. Calculated. Not your style. Arthur stared, speechless. Then who? Poirot's eyes shifted slowly toward Miss Fielding. She started, colour flooding her face. Me? You can't believe. Poirot raised a hand. Mademoiselle, your pearl button was found beneath Mademoiselle Eleanor's chandelier. You alone were near her when the tea was served. You have the keys to her drawers and letters. And your devotion, it is too complete, too silent. Such devotion often conceals resentment. Tears welled in her eyes. She never trusted me. Always I was the servant, the companion, never the friend. And yet I did not wish her dead. I swear it. Poirot watched her keenly. Perhaps you did not wish it, but you feared she would dismiss you. And so you pretended to protect her, even as you fed her fears. A dangerous game, mademoiselle. But someone else, someone cleverer, has used your actions to mask their own. Eleanor looked stricken. You mean, there is yet another? Poirot nodded slowly. Oh, we are close now, but not there. Tonight, I shall know all. I must test a theory. Arthur scoffed. And how will you do that? Poirot smiled faintly. By inviting the murderer to act again. That night, Poirot sat alone in the study, the door slightly ajar, the lamp burning low. On the desk, a single sheet of paper lay waiting, a note written in Eleanor's hand, announcing her intention to leave Marbury Hall in the morning. Poirot waited. The hall clock struck 11, then 12. Silence. Then, faintly, the creak of a floorboard. A shadow moved at the door. A hand reached inside, gloved, careful, toward the paper. Poirot's voice cut through the darkness. Arites. The figure froze. Poirot rose, light flashing across his face. "Ah," he said softly. "So it is you. At last, the pattern is complete." The intruder turned to flee, but Hastings appeared in the doorway, blocking escape. Poirot smiled grimly. "No, my friend. The game is over." Chapter 5: The Night Watch. The clock struck midnight, echoing through the cold corridors of Marbury Hall like the tolling of some unseen doom. In the study, under the dim glow of the lamp, Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his expression serene yet sharp as glass. The shadowed figure, caught between light and darkness, froze mid-step, a silhouette of guilt. Hastings, breathless but resolute, moved closer, blocking the only exit. "Lights, Hastings, if you please," said Poirot softly. The room flooded with light. The intruder's face was revealed, pale, wide-eyed, trembling. It was Mrs. Greaves, the housekeeper. Eleanor gasped from the doorway where she had been waiting unseen. "Mrs. Greaves! But why?" Poirot did not answer immediately. He walked toward the housekeeper, his eyes glinting. "Madam, perhaps you will enlighten us yourself. What business have you with that letter upon the desk?" Mrs. Greaves clutched her apron. I came to tidy the room, sir. I thought Miss Eleanor's letter might be misplaced." "Ah," said Poirot gently, "a most considerate act, at midnight. And yet, see how your hands tremble." "Non, madam, it is not tidiness that brings you here, but fear." She stammered. "Fear? Of what?" "Of discovery," said Poirot, stepping closer. "You came to remove that letter because it mentioned a journey, Miss Marbury's journey away from Marbury Hall. And if she were to leave, your plans would fail, would they not?" Mrs. Greaves's composure broke. "You've no proof," she hissed. "You've no right to accuse me of—" Poirot raised a hand. "Not of murder, no. You are a thief, madam, but not a killer." A gasp rippled through the room. "You have been siphoning funds from the household accounts for years," Poirot continued coolly. "When the master died, you feared discovery, for Mademoiselle Eleanor began taking more interest in the accounts. You tampered with letters, intercepted messages, but murder? None. That is beyond you." Mrs. Greaves's face twisted. "I didn't try to kill her. I only wanted to keep things as they were." Poirot nodded gravely. "I know. And tonight you have served your purpose, for you have proven something vital." He turned to Hastings. "My friend, you recall the key point, the chandelier incident, the poisoned tea, the cut cord. 3 attempts, each different in method but all aimed to appear as accidents. Such diversity of plan suggests not passion, but calculation. Yet Mrs. Greaves, she is simple in her cunning. No, the mind behind this is finer, more practiced." Arthur, who had been standing by the door, burst out, "Then who, for God's sake?" Poirot looked at him with curious mildness. "Patience, monsieur. There is one final piece I must place before I speak. Tonight, we watch." Poirot instructed the household to retire, though he and Hastings remained awake. The detective set 2 chairs in the darkened corridor outside Eleanor's room, their view of the door partially hidden by a tall vase of dried flowers. Hastings yawned. "I say, Poirot, if you're expecting another attempt, do you really think the murderer will try again so soon?" "Mais oui," said Poirot quietly. "The criminal, he is desperate now. He knows I am close. The only safety left for him lies in silence, and that silence can be achieved only through Miss Marbury's death." Hastings frowned. "But she's under watch. Surely that will deter him." Poirot smiled faintly. "Courage, mon ami, often masquerades as foolishness. The murderer is clever enough to strike under our very eyes. Hours passed. The house was still, save for the ticking of the great clock and the soft rustle of curtains stirred by the draught. At 2:30, Poirot rose suddenly, finger to lips. "Hush," he whispered. Footsteps, very light, very slow. From the far end of the corridor came the faint creak of a door, then another. A shadow glided across the floor, moving toward Eleanor's room. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The figure paused at her door, a hand lifting, and then, in one swift motion, pushed it open. Poirot sprang to his feet. "Arites," he cried, and switched on his torch. The light fell upon Miss Fielding. She stood frozen, a small vial glinting in her trembling hand. "Miss Fielding!" Hastings exclaimed. "You?" Poirot's tone was calm, almost pitying. "So. It is as I thought." The woman's composure crumbled. "No. You don't understand." Eleanor, awakened by the commotion, appeared in her doorway, pale and terrified. "Emily, what are you doing with that?" Miss Fielding dropped the vial, which rolled across the floor. Poirot stooped and picked it up delicately. "Hydrocyanic acid," he murmured. "A most deadly poison, and in the tea again, perhaps." Miss Fielding's eyes filled with tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I wanted to protect her." Poirot's gaze softened slightly. "Tell us, mademoiselle. The truth, est-il neuvaus plat?" She sank to her knees. "It was Arthur," she whispered. "He told me Eleanor was unwell, that she meant to hurt herself. He begged me to help him watch over her. When the chandelier fell, he said it was an accident, that she'd loosened the cord herself in despair. I believed him. I thought he loved her, wanted to save her from scandal and ruin. I only meant to calm her nerves, the medicine." Poirot interrupted quietly. "And yet it was poison." She looked up at him, broken. "He told me it was harmless. He gave it to me to mix with her tea. I swear I never knew." Arthur's voice roared from behind. "Lies! She's mad." Poirot turned, eyes blazing. "No, monsieur, you are. The lies are yours." Arthur backed away. "You've no proof." "Oh, but I have," said Poirot softly. "The vial, it bears your fingerprints. The glass from the night of the second attempt, also yours. And tonight, you did not sleep. You waited, listening, knowing Miss Fielding would act under your influence." Arthur's voice faltered. I wanted only to frighten her. She was going to ruin us all." Poirot advanced a step. "You wished her dead, monsieur. Her death would silence your scandal, restore your inheritance, erase your shame. When Mrs. Greaves was suspected, you smiled. When Miss Fielding obeyed your suggestion, you saw safety. But you forgot, Poirot observes everything." Arthur's defiance collapsed. He dropped into a chair, head in hands. "It's true," he muttered. "I couldn't bear it, to lose everything, to live under her judgment. I told Emily what to do. I never thought she'd go through with it." Miss Fielding sobbed. "He used me. All this time, he used me." Poirot said gently, "Yes, mademoiselle. But take comfort, the guilt of murder does not rest upon you. You were the instrument, not the mind." Eleanor's voice trembled. "Poirot, what will become of them?" He looked at her gravely. "That, mademoiselle, is for the law to decide. But I think you will show mercy where justice permits." He turned to Hastings. "And you see, my friend, how the strands untangle themselves. Each deception revealed, each false trail crossed, until only the truth remains, clear and cold. Hastings nodded slowly. By Jove, Poirot, you've done it again. But how did you know it was Arthur? Poirot smiled faintly. Because, mon ami, the human heart betrays itself. In every conversation, every glance, he revealed both fear and superiority, the perfect combination for a manipulator. And more than that, his handwriting. On the letter to Miss Fielding, disguised though it was, the loop of the R in Eleanor's was the same as on his old love letters. The tiniest of details, Hastings, but decisive. He straightened his tie. So, you see, the murder was never completed, because vanity and deceit are impatient. In the end, they always expose themselves. As dawn broke over Marbury Hall, the police arrived to take Arthur Marbury away. Miss Fielding was led gently to her room, weeping softly. Eleanor stood at the window, the pale morning light touching her face. Poirot joined her. "It is over, mademoiselle. The danger is past." She nodded slowly. "And yet, it feels as though the house will never be free of what happened here." Poirot looked out over the mist-shrouded lawns. "Perhaps not. But remember, mademoiselle, out of the attempt at murder came truth. And truth, however bitter, purifies." He gave a small, satisfied sigh, adjusting his cuffs. "Come, Hastings. There is a train at 10, and I do not like to miss breakfast." Chapter 6, The Confession at Dawn. The first rays of dawn filtered through the tall windows of Marbury Hall, turning the frost-covered lawns to silver. Inside, the house seemed quieter, almost suspended in a delicate tension that lingered after the night's revelations. Even the great hall clock, which had rung so ominously in the previous hours, now ticked softly, as though hesitant to disturb the fragile calm. Hercule Poirot sat in the drawing-room, impeccably dressed as ever, a cup of chocolate steaming in his hand. Hastings was perched in the adjoining chair, rubbing his eyes, still incredulous at the events of the previous night. "Monsieur Poirot," Hastings said finally, "I cannot fathom how you did it. Arthur's guilt, and yet Miss Fielding's involvement, it is all so terribly tangled." Poirot smiled faintly, tapping his fingers together. "Ah, Hastings, the human heart is a labyrinth. One must follow each corridor patiently, and sometimes wait for the correct door to open. Last night, that door opened, not with force, but by understanding." Eleanor entered, looking pale but composed. Her eyes, however, held an intensity born of fear and lingering uncertainty. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "before Arthur is taken away, I must know everything. You saw the attempts, yes, but there are questions. Why did Arthur involve Miss Fielding? Why the poison, the chandelier, the cord? Was he clever enough to plan all of this alone?" Poirot set down his cup, steepling his fingers. "Mademoiselle, let us recount the steps carefully." Arthur's mind, though cunning in selfish matters, lacked patience for subtlety. He could plan a love affair, he could manipulate a companion, but the execution of murder in multiple forms required assistance. That is why Miss Fielding was used, indirectly. But the cleverest aspect, the creation of red herrings, came from Arthur himself, a mind desperate, not precise. Eleanor's lips trembled. "And the letters in the study? The hidden will?" "Ah, yes. The letters were the key," said Poirot, rising and walking toward the fireplace. Arthur had known about his father's intention to change the will. To secure the inheritance he believed was owed to him, he must remove the obstacle, not by violence alone, but by fear, manipulation, and subtle threat. The letters revealed the existence of a will favoring you, mademoiselle. That knowledge, and the chance of discovery, made him reckless. Hastings frowned. But the night's events, the chandelier, the cord, the poisoned tea, each of these was deliberate. He staged accidents to cover his intention. Poirot nodded. "Precisely, Hastings. Each attempt was intended to appear coincidental. The chandelier, the cord, even the tea, all were designed to suggest carelessness, misfortune, rather than malice. Arthur believed that by creating a trail of minor incidents, no suspicion would fall on him. A clever man? But still a man whose heart betrays him. Observe the human flaw, impatience. He could not wait, and therefore mistakes were made. Eleanor's eyes were wide with understanding, mingled with horror. And Miss Fielding? She did not wish to harm me, yet she handled the poison. Poirot smiled gently. Ah, yes. She was the instrument, not the mind. Arthur, knowing she adored you and would obey any request to protect you, manipulated her fears. She believed she was safeguarding your life, when in truth, she was unknowingly assisting in his plan. The genius of evil lies in turning virtue into unwitting complicity. Hastings rubbed his jaw. And the button, Poirot? The pearl button found near the chandelier. Ah, Hastings, the smallest details are often the largest witnesses. Miss Fielding dropped it when startled by the chandelier. It confirmed presence at the precise location of potential harm. Yet, it also illuminated the pattern. Her movements mirrored the intentions of Arthur. Small evidence, but decisive when combined with other details. Poirot turned to Eleanor. Mademoiselle, you have been the calm in this storm, but you were never alone. Fear does strange things to people. Your cousin's desperation played upon that fear, yet the truth, as always, has emerged through observation, reasoning, and careful deduction. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. And Arthur? What will become of him? Poirot's expression softened. That is for the law to decide. My task, mademoiselle, was to prevent harm and reveal truth. He will answer for his actions. The court will weigh the facts, and justice will follow, as it must. Later that morning, Poirot insisted on a careful inspection of the study, the library, and the dining room once more. Each location was examined in minute detail, no stone left unturned. Hastings, somewhat exhausted but fascinated, observed Poirot's meticulous methods. Every creak of the floorboard, every dust mark, every misaligned rug, Poirot explained as he moved through the corridors, is a story waiting to be read. The murderer forgets, Hastings, that the house itself remembers. Inanimate witnesses, they are silent, yes, but they betray all who disturb them. In the library, Poirot paused, picking up a fallen book. He flipped through its pages, examining fingerprints and noting faint impressions. Here, observe. The spine is slightly worn in a way that only frequent use would cause. Whoever searched this shelf was careful, but they left a pattern. A pattern that, when combined with the letters in the study, confirms the sequence of events. Hastings shook his head. I'd never have noticed that. Poirot smiled. That is why you are my friend, Hastings. You see the obvious, I see the hidden. Eleanor, standing nearby, touched the desk where the letters had been found. I feel as though this house, it will never be the same, she said softly. Poirot nodded. No, mademoiselle. But now you know the truth. Knowledge, though it may bring unease, is far better than fear of the unknown. And the heart that acts with clarity, rather than panic, is safest. The sun climbed higher, gilding the frost with its light. Poirot convened the household once more in the drawing room. Arthur sat quietly, his head bowed. Miss Fielding, still shaken, avoided everyone's gaze. Mrs. Greaves stood to one side, chastened but silent. Poirot addressed them all, his voice calm but unwavering. Let this day be the day of confession and understanding. The events of the night have shown us that fear, manipulation, and hidden motives can create dangers most subtle. Yet, with careful observation, reasoning, and patience, we have prevented harm and revealed the truth. Arthur Marbury, guided by greed and fear of exposure, orchestrated the attempts on Mademoiselle Eleanor's life. Miss Fielding, believing she acted in protection, was unwittingly complicit. Mrs. Greaves sought to cover minor misdeeds, not murder. The rest of you are witnesses and survivors. Eleanor exhaled slowly. So it is all explained. Poirot nodded. All, mademoiselle, except the human heart, which remains ever complex. But the dangerous part, the malicious intent, has been revealed. The path is now clear for justice. Arthur raised his head, voice quiet but steady. I confess. Everything Poirot has said is true. I never meant to kill, though I intended to frighten her. But I see now that my actions were foolish, dangerous, and cruel. I accept whatever judgment follows. Poirot inclined his head. Courage, monsieur. You speak the truth, and in that there is a measure of redemption. Not all Evilders confess, but those who do at least acknowledge the harm they have caused. Eleanor stepped forward, her eyes full of tears, yet calm. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. For seeing the truth, for keeping me safe. I cannot imagine how I would have managed without you. Poirot's moustache twitched in a small smile. It is nothing, mademoiselle. It is the duty of a detective to protect life, reveal truth, and restore order. And now, Hastings, the case is nearly complete. Only one final step remains, the confirmation of the evidence and the presentation to the authorities. The threads are drawn, and the tapestry of truth is visible in its entirety. Hastings leaned back, exhausted but relieved. By Jove, Poirot, it's extraordinary. Every detail, every small clue, all fitting together perfectly. Poirot sipped his chocolate delicately, eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Exactment, my friend. And it is always the little things, a footprint, a drop button, a misplaced letter, that guide the mind of the detective. The clever murderer believes he controls the game, but he underestimates the power of the little grey cells. Outside, the frost began to melt in the morning sun. Marbury Hall, still shadowed by the events of the past days, seemed quieter now, not haunted, but waiting. Waiting for justice, for restoration, and for the careful, untroubled order of life to return once more. Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs. Come, Hastings. We shall prepare to leave. But remember this, my friend, danger is often close at hand, hidden in ordinary faces, ordinary places. The human heart, when guided by greed or fear, can become most ingenious in mischief. And that, as always, is why we must remain vigilant. Hastings smiled. Ever vigilant, Poirot. Poirot nodded. And ever precise. Chapter 7, Unraveling the Motives. The day following Arthur Marbury's confession dawned with a delicate clarity. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Marbury Hall, glinting off frost still clinging stubbornly to the edges of the lawn. Though the immediate threat had been neutralized, an uneasy quiet settled over the household, as if the walls themselves held their breath, waiting for the next revelation. Hercule Poirot, as always, moved through this tension with an air of serene control. He dressed meticulously, ensuring every fold of his suit and every curl of his moustache was perfect, before summoning Hastings to accompany him on a systematic review of the house. Mon ami, Poirot began, the story is almost complete, yet the true richness of a case lies not only in deeds, but in motives. To understand the human heart is to understand crime itself. Hastings nodded, eager but somewhat apprehensive. You mean we're going to dig deeper? Even after Arthur confessed? Poirot smiled faintly. Precisely, Hastings. Confession, while illuminating, does not always reveal the whole truth. And sometimes, the human mind conceals as much in what it fears to say as in what it dares to confess. Their first stop was the library, where Poirot carefully examined the ledger books, letters, and personal papers left on the desk. Eleanor had agreed to allow him unrestricted access, though her eyes followed every movement with a mixture of apprehension and relief. Poirot picked up a letter, reading it silently. Here, Hastings, we see the first thread, financial tension. Arthur was not merely greedy. He was desperate. The estate's resources were dwindling, debts hidden under the guise of routine expenses. His father, prudent and cautious, discovered these discrepancies. That discovery, the knowledge of potential disgrace, became a powerful motivator. Hastings leaned over the desk, frowning. So greed alone wasn't enough to push him to act. He was afraid. Exactly, mon ami. Fear is a stronger motivator than greed, for it turns reason to panic, and panic to action. And when you combine fear with opportunity and resentment, you have the perfect storm. Poirot tapped the papers carefully, organizing them. Notice also, Hastings, the letters from Miss Fielding. They are tender, protective, and yet, there is a subtle thread of coercion. Arthur relied upon her loyalty, manipulating her emotions. She acted out of love and duty, not understanding the true danger. Hastings shook his head. Poor girl, and poor Eleanor. Yes, Poirot murmured. All hearts entangled in the web of secrecy. Next, Poirot requested to speak with the household individually, including the servants who had unwittingly played parts in the unfolding drama. First came Miss Fielding. She sat with her hands clasped, pale and nervous, yet resolute to tell her story fully. You see, Hastings, Poirot said, a confession is only part of a story. The mind must also reveal why it acted. Miss Fielding, guided by affection for Mademoiselle Eleanor, and persuaded by Arthur's subtle direction, became an instrument of chaos. But never a killer. That is an important distinction. Emily Fielding recounted how Arthur had approached her in the days before the incidents, speaking in tones of urgency and fear. He said it was for my lady's protection. That she might be in danger if she did not follow his instructions. I never thought it was poison, only medicine, to calm her nerves. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Ah, look her! The heart can be deceived by the softest words. She acted from devotion, not malice. And yet, her obedience brought the risk closer to reality. Here, Hastings, we see the subtle interaction of love and manipulation, a motive masked by sentiment, almost invisible. Poirot then spoke with Mrs. Greaves, the housekeeper who had attempted to conceal minor financial misdeeds. Your actions, Poirot explained gently, were not malicious in the same sense, but they provided distraction and false trails for the true culprit. You created opportunities for misdirection, unknowingly aiding Arthur's plans. The housekeeper, still trembling, nodded. I didn't mean anyone harm. I only wanted to protect myself. To keep my position secure. Poirot smiled faintly. Self-preservation is the most natural of instincts. Yet it illustrates the way even minor personal motives can feed the larger scheme. Having gathered testimony, Poirot returned to the drawing room with Hastings and Eleanor. He seated himself, tapping the floor lightly with his walking stick. Now, mademoiselle, he said, let us consider the true tapestry of motives. Arthur's greed and fear combined with opportunity to produce reckless action. Miss Fielding, manipulated by loyalty and affection, unwittingly assisted. Mrs. Greaves, seeking only to protect herself, inadvertently created confusion. And finally, mademoiselle, your presence, your authority, your rightful inheritance, all served as the backdrop, the stage upon which this drama unfolded. Eleanor listened in awe, absorbing Poirot's analysis. So all of this, the poison, the chandelier, the cord, it wasn't random. Non, mademoiselle. Each act, each placement of object, each whispered instruction was deliberate. And yet each carried the fingerprints, the heart, and the weakness of its actor. This is why observation is critical, not just of deeds, but of intentions. Motive is the soul of crime. Hastings frowned. And yet, Poirot, it's almost impossible to see all of this as separate from emotion. Fear, love, loyalty, it's human, but dangerous. Exactly, Hastings. Human nature is the final puzzle piece. A clever mind can calculate steps, yet it cannot fully control the emotional responses of others. That is why the crime was never completed. Chaos and human unpredictability intervened. Poirot leaned back, steepling his fingers. Observe, too, the red herrings, the pearl button, the subtle footprints, the minor accidents, each designed to mislead. Yet these are never random. They serve to distract, while the true narrative progresses quietly in the background. A criminal may plan, but the house itself, the people themselves, betray him. Eleanor's voice was quiet. So, the danger is gone now. Poirot's eyes softened. Oh, mademoiselle. The danger has been contained. The motives understood, the instruments revealed. Justice will follow. And, importantly, the human lessons remain, that greed, fear, and manipulation may ignite the spark, but loyalty, courage, and observation extinguish it. Hastings shook his head, impressed. You make it all sound inevitable, Poirot. Yet it must have required patience beyond measure. Patience, Hastings, is the hallmark of the detective. The mind must wait, watch, observe, and only act when the threads are clear. Yesterday, tonight, tomorrow, the human heart reveals its secrets, and I merely trace the outline. By mid-afternoon, Poirot had dictated a full report for the authorities, outlining motives, methods, and the sequence of events that had brought Marbury Hall to the brink of tragedy. Each detail was carefully documented, each human factor analyzed. Eleanor approached him privately. Monsieur Poirot, I am so grateful. You not only saved my life but explained it, piece by piece. I feel, almost as though I understand my cousin now, even with all his failings. Poirot smiled faintly. Understanding is the first step to forgiveness, mademoiselle. Though justice will act upon him, your mind and heart are spared confusion and doubt. And that, I think, is the most important reward. Hastings, watching the exchange, whispered to Poirot, do you ever tire of unraveling such complex hearts? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Never, Hastings. Each mind, each motive, is a new puzzle. And each puzzle solved leaves a clarity that is most satisfying. The criminal, the victim, the innocent, all play their roles, and the detective's task is to bring the truth to light. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting golden light over the frost-mottled lawns, Poirot surveyed the house once more. The danger had passed, the motives were clear, and the threads of intrigue were drawn taut and visible. Yet, as always, there remained one final task, the resolution of consequences, the last step in the chain of events. And Poirot knew that the conclusion, when revealed, would tie together every detail, every human emotion, into a single, unmistakable truth. Chapter 8, The Final Revelation. The evening descended on Marbury Hall like a velvet curtain, drawing long shadows across the frost-kissed lawns. The household, still tense from the events of the previous days, gathered once more in the drawing-room, summoned by Hercule Poirot. The detective's presence, calm and commanding, brought an air of certainty in the midst of lingering unease. Eleanor Marbury sat near the fire, her hands clasped in her lap, while Hastings remained close to Poirot, observing his methodical movements. Arthur Marbury, pale and subdued, was seated at a corner, awaiting the conclusion of the matter that had brought so much fear and confusion to the estate. Miss Fielding stood quietly, her eyes downcast, still reeling from her unintended role in the attempted murder. Even Mrs. Greaves, chastened and fearful, lingered near the door. Poirot rose, adjusting his cuffs with precise care. Miss Amis, the time has come to tie together all threads, to illuminate the final truth. We have seen the attempts, understood the motives, and identified the instruments of chaos. Yet there remains the most delicate question, the mind behind the plan, and the subtle forces that guided each act. He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the assembled group. Let us begin at the beginning. The first incident, the poisoned tea, was not simply an attempt to harm. It was a test, to observe reactions, to measure fear. Who would act? Who would notice? Who could be manipulated? Hastings leaned forward. You mean Arthur? He did that. Poirot nodded. Hastings. Arthur knew of the change in the will, the potential loss of inheritance. He sought to frighten, to manipulate, and to maintain control. Yet he could not risk acting openly. Therefore, he used Miss Fielding, knowing her loyalty and affection for Mademoiselle Eleanor would ensure her cooperation. Eleanor's eyes widened. But she didn't know. She only wanted to help me. Exactly, Mademoiselle, Poirot said gently. Her heart was pure, but it was guided incorrectly. And that is where the danger became real. Poirot continued, moving gracefully around the room. The second incident, the chandelier, was designed to appear accidental. A small cut in the cord, placed carefully, timed to sway with the draft. Only the sharpest observer, as we noted, would suspect deliberate action. And yet, there is a signature in every act, a pattern in the chaos. Arthur's impatience and fear betrayed him. A button dropped, a footprint left, small, but decisive. He picked up the pearl button from the table, showing it to the group. This small object, lost in the dark, spoke volumes. It confirmed presence and timing, connecting the events and the actor. Every detail, Miss Amis, is important. Even the smallest object can reveal the truth. Hastings whispered, and the cord? The tea? The attempts, they all link back to him. Poirot nodded solemnly. Yes, mon ami. Yet, as always, the method and the motive must be understood together. Arthur feared exposure, feared loss of position, feared poverty and humiliation. That fear, compounded by desire, created a reckless energy. The acts themselves were less dangerous than the intention behind them, but intention, unchecked, can be fatal. Poirot then turned toward Miss Fielding. Mademoiselle, your role, though seemingly central, was that of the instrument. You acted under guidance, believing you were protecting Miss Eleanor. You carried out tasks with devotion, yet without understanding the true danger. And thus, by accident of circumstance, you helped reveal the patterns that allowed the detectives' little grey cells to do their work. Emily Fielding bowed her head. I never meant harm. Never. Non, mademoiselle. And that is why justice views intent differently from action. You are spared the consequences that Arthur must face. But you have learned, as we all have, that loyalty, even when pure, can be manipulated by those with darker hearts. Poirot then addressed Arthur directly. Monsieur Marbury, it is not enough to confess. One must also understand the consequences of manipulation, the vulnerability of others, and the danger of mixing fear with desire. You sought to frighten, and in doing so, created peril. You relied on hearts and minds other than your own to act, and that, monsieur, is the essence of criminal recklessness. Arthur, his voice barely above a whisper, said, I see that now. I never intended death. I wanted only to protect myself. Poirot's expression softened. And therein lies the tragedy. Human selfishness, fear, and pride can drive one to act recklessly, leaving others endangered. Your confession was necessary, but understanding the moral weight of your actions, that is the final lesson. He turned back to the assembly. Now, let us examine the evidence in its entirety. the letters hidden in the study revealing the revised will. The poison, the chandelier, the cord, each staged, each deliberate. The red herrings, the drop button, the fingerprints, the small inconsistencies, all designed to mislead. And yet, through careful observation and reasoning, we saw the connections. The human heart, the sequence of acts, and the tools of deception all formed a single pattern visible to the trained eye. Hastings murmured, "Remarkable, Poirot. You've taken chaos and turned it into order." Poirot inclined his head. "Yes, Hastings. Order is the reward of observation and patience. And now, the final revelation must be made, not merely of acts, but of the motives that shaped them." He walked to the window, looking out at the frost-glimmering grounds. The heart of this mystery is not the desire to kill, but the desire to control, to manipulate, and to secure. Arthur feared loss, not merely of wealth, but of status, of reputation. His actions, while reckless, were born of human weakness. Yet it is human weakness that makes the heart visible, that allows the detective to trace intention, and to reveal truth. Eleanor's voice trembled slightly. "So, everything is explained. Every attempt, every danger, it all came from him." Poirot smiled faintly. "Oh, mademoiselle. Each act, each manipulation, each small fear exploited, the source is clear. The pattern is complete. And now, justice will act, human hearts have learned, and the household may begin to heal." He paused, letting his gaze sweep over the room, taking in each face. "The beauty of a case such as this," Poirot continued, "is in its revelation. Small details, seemingly insignificant, prove decisive. Trust and loyalty can be manipulated. Fear and greed can drive actions that appear accidental. But clarity, observation, and patience illuminate every shadow. Even the darkest act cannot remain hidden forever." Hastings, still in awe, whispered, "By Jove, Poirot, you truly have a mind unlike any other." Poirot adjusted his cuffs once more, smiling faintly. "Merci, mon ami. But it is not the mind alone, it is observation, and the careful consideration of human motives. Without those, even the cleverest intellect is blind." The household remained silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of his words. Then, Eleanor rose, her expression serene but thoughtful. "Monsieur Poirot, you've given me not only safety, but understanding. I can face the future now, knowing what truly happened." Poirot inclined his head. "And that, mademoiselle, is the reward of truth. To know, to understand, to move forward without fear. The danger has passed, the motives revealed, the consequences understood. Marbury Hall may now return to its quiet life, tempered by the lessons of the human heart." Hastings rose as well, stretching. "Well, I'd say this is one of your finest victories, Poirot. Clear, precise, and devastatingly effective." Poirot allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. "Merci, Hastings. And remember, the human heart is always the final puzzle. Observe it carefully, and it will reveal every secret." Outside, the frost began to melt in the late afternoon sun, the house quiet at last. Inside, the last shadows of fear and uncertainty had lifted, replaced by clarity, order, and the comforting certainty of revealed truth. And as Hercule Poirot prepared to depart Marbury Hall, he knew that, for once, every thread of the mystery had been drawn taut, and every heart, though tested, had survived.